Making sure that you're aligned with your stakeholders, especially your key stakeholders, in a continuous way is very important in project delivery. In any kind of team, whether you're working in products or your business operations team, making sure that your stakeholders are aware of what's going on, that they don't have any bad surprises, and that you're aligned in the direction of the priorities you're taking are keys for success. If you can do that well, then life is going to be good. If you can't do that well, then you're going to be in constant escalation meetings with people complaining about what the team is doing, the direction the team is going, the results the team are achieving. So what I would like to do here is introduce a simple concept or tool that you can use to start improving how you're aligning with your stakeholders, right? So the tool to introduce, first of all, is something called a stakeholder map. And the stakeholder map is what you can see here. On the y-axis, we're going to be talking about the power or influence that each one of our stakeholders have in the organization, right? Because the idea is we're going to be mapping all our stakeholders here. On the x-axis, what we have is how interested is this stakeholder in my team, my project, my product, whatever it is that we're doing, right? So you have these two axes. How powerful are these stakeholders and how interested are they in the work we're doing? And what ends up happening is, so what is the step? The first thing you need to do is sit down and think about who are the stakeholders that are impacting my team or my project. And a stakeholder here, remember, is anybody who can impact your project, either by changing requirements, by changing constraints you might have, for example, budget or scope or things like this, or people that you depend on to deliver, or people that are impacted by your delivery and they're going to have to change something. Or you could have external stakeholders, right, partners or clients or users of the organization. So a stakeholder is anybody impacted by the work we're doing. So the exercise would start with first identifying all your stakeholders. So they're typically a good idea. You would sit with your core team and think a little bit about, okay guys, let's make a list of all the stakeholders we have, all the people that we have to somehow stay aligned with or maintain informed about what's going on because they're impacted by our work. And you would list all those stakeholders. Once you've done that, the second step would be, let's map them on this stakeholder map, right? Which means for every single one of those stakeholders or stakeholder groups, sometimes if it's a whole department in the organization, you would have to decide, okay, how powerful or influential are they and how interested are they in the work that we do? And then you end up with 4 types of stakeholders. So let's start on the bottom left. Stakeholders that are not very powerful or influential and also not very interested in the work we're doing. So maybe some team in the organization that we have some kind of loose, faraway dependency with or something like that. What's the strategy that we're going to take with those stakeholders? Basically, monitor them. What does this mean? Essentially, I need to reach out to them to say, at what level do we need to be informed? How are you guys going to inform me about what's going on with you? So maybe I'm going to join some kind of mailing list that they have or distribution list whenever they send their reports or quarterly objectives or things like that. And likewise for us, how do you guys want to stay informed about what we do? So typically here, one of the things that you might see is this. These stakeholders become part of your distribution list. So whenever we're sending out materials, letting the organization know or our stakeholders know, hey, these are the latest updates or the latest changes we've done, they'll receive that email, they can take a look at it, and they'll reach out if they have any questions. So now let's move to the top left of the graph. The powerful or influential stakeholders, but they might not be that interested in our team or project. So for example, some kind of financial director, the CFO for example, right? A lot of power and influence, but interested in a portfolio of projects and teams, and ours is not the highest priority on their list, right? So they care in a sense about what we're doing, but they're not breathing down our necks, okay? What's going to be the strategy with these stakeholders? Of course, we want to make sure to keep them happy. And why is this important? Well, if these people are unhappy with you, if you're creating problems for them, then of course they have the power and influence to impact your project or your team. So you need to make sure that those people are happy. So the efforts there or the action there is, once you've identified them, go talk to them and understand what they expect from you. What are their constraints? What are the things that they want to have? So in my previous example of the CFO, if the thing they're most worried about is the financial reporting that happens every month, then you need to make sure that all your reports are filled in by the end of the month so your team is never late and your team always has a dashboard up to date, right? That would be one approach to keep them happy, for example. So find out the constraints, find out what matters to them, and make sure that you can comply them or find an agreement of how you're going to comply with those. So now we move to the right side of the graph, the stakeholders that are interested in the work that we're doing, right? Let's start on the bottom right, people that are interested but not that powerful or influential in the organization. what's going to be the best approach for an agile team to handle these stakeholders, or what would be an agile approach to handle these stakeholders? Well, we want to keep them informed. We want to make sure that they know what's going on so that if they have something to say, they're not missing information, right? So more than, for example, a distribution list, because we don't want to take the risk that they might not be reading these things. We want to make sure that they are informed about what's going on so that we can get their feedback early on if necessary. For an agile team working in iterations, so a time box where you plan some work and deliver it, and usually very short, something like 1, 2, or 3 weeks, well, one easy way to keep those people informed would be to invite them to your iteration review, right? So at the end of the iteration, when you get together with your team and your stakeholders to just review the things that we finished that iteration, those people should be invited there. That way they can get an easy update on what did we work on this previous iteration, what's coming up next, and if they have any issues, we can discuss about it right then and there. And now we get to the fourth groups of stakeholders in the top right, people that are powerful and influential and interested in our product or team. And those, of course, are our key stakeholders. And with these key stakeholders, you need to keep in mind there's 2 things you need to do with them that are very important. One is you need to keep them up to date about what's going on with your team. So, just like your keep informed stakeholders, they should be part of your iteration review or wherever you get together on a short-term basis, so no longer than a month, to review the work you guys have done and what's coming up next. Those people definitely need to be invited there. However, that's not going to be enough. There's another important activity you need to do with these key stakeholders, which is what we would say in Agile to refine the work coming up. So you have a backlog of work items that your team needs to work on. Those people need to be involved in the prioritization of those items and making sure that we're working on the right things. Why? Because those are our key stakeholders. They have a very strong voice that's going to help us in our prioritization efforts. So we need to involve them in that discussions in what we would call backlog refinement. And I put there in parentheses essentially prioritization because that's the discussion that's happening in that activity, right? We're discussing about the priority of upcoming work to make sure that we're working on the most important thing. Another way that a stakeholder map can be useful for you is by also thinking about the kind of relationship you have with these stakeholders, right? So imagine that I identified some stakeholders, I mapped them here on the 4 quadrants. Now I can also add some additional information here, which is what type of relationship do I have with this stakeholder? We can imagine a simple model of something like green, yellow, red. So green would be people that I collaborate with actively, we have a great working relationship. Yellow would be people that maybe I don't know that well, or we've collaborated a couple of times, things are okay, but it's not that close of a relationship. And red would be like somebody that for some reason I have some kind of antagonistic relationship. Either we have conflicting objectives, so our interests are not aligned, or it could be also on the personal level, we just don't get along, for example, right? But if we think about our stakeholders in that way, then your stakeholder map is even giving you more information, right? If you have a lot of yellow or red stakeholders on your key stakeholder group, that's clearly a huge issue and something you need to address immediately to start improving those relationships. If, however, the stakeholders that you're not very closely aligned with are part of your monitor group, maybe not that big of a deal because you don't have to collaborate with them that actively. They're not your key stakeholders. Actually, they're of the 4 groups, they're the least important of the stakeholders, right? And this is another key insight here to help guide teams and product managers. We don't have enough hours in the day. We can't keep everybody happy. So you need to make sure that you're keeping the right people happy. And something like a stakeholder map lets you prioritize those. For example, if you're getting conflicting requests from stakeholders, of course you should always try to talk and align and make sure that we all can come to the same agreement together. But we also know that doesn't always happen. And sometimes you have to take decisions. Understanding who your stakeholders are helps you prioritize which of those voices might have a bigger weight than other voices and helps you take decisions and prioritize. Ultimately, what you want is to have clarity on who your stakeholders are, how they're interested or impacted by the work you're doing, and how are you going to maintain a relationship with them, right? How often are you going to see them? What material or reports are they getting from your team? And is that enough for them? And how do you hear back from them if they have issues? Make sure you have those things cleared up so you can have a good relationship with your stakeholders and take advantage of their energy, enthusiasm, opinions, visions, ideas to improve your overall effectiveness and value delivery.